This is a series that goes by many names. In Japan, it's known as Yusha no Kusei ni Namakida, or in English, for a hero, you are quite bold. Or hilariously translated by Google to, I am cute because of the brave man. It's also known as the No Heroes Allowed series, or once further by the What Did I Do to Deserve This, My Lord series. Or finally by NIS America's dumbass title that caused them to pull the game from the PlayStation Network in America just after release in fear of litigation from the Batman estate as Holy Invasion of Privacy BadMan, What Did I Do to Deserve This? Why does NIS America actively go out of their way to make the worst possible localization decisions? Do they take joy in patronizing the niche gamers that support their business? I digress. That's another conversation for another time. But to answer my own question, yes, they do. I just refer to the series simply as the BadMan Games, because he's the running thread that ties all the games together. The BadMan Games are ironically the most underground games in the library of Sony's exclusive titles. Most likely, you've probably never heard of them, and that's a crying shame. Holy shit, BadMan, what did this series do to deserve its cult status? As it stands currently, there are 5 total entries in the BadMan series, all of which are sadly destined to toil away in obscurity due to their releases on relatively niche platforms, their horribly butchered naming conventions, and because they exist as a mostly digital-only series in America. If you ever wanted to discover the BadMan franchise, you would have quite the difficult time, as it's a fairly difficult title to stumble upon, and let me explain why. It all started with the first BadMan game, with the now redacted title of Holy Invasion of Privacy BadMan, What Did I Do to Deserve This?, which was released exclusively to the PlayStation Store on PSP in America. However, it was still released physically under the stupid name in Europe. It was eventually included as a secret unlockable on the American physical release of the sequel, BadMan 2, which also was going to be originally butchered by NIS America as Holy Invasion of Privacy BadMan 2. Time to tighten up security, but it was changed at the 0 hour to What Did I Do to Deserve This, My Lord 2. Anyways, this was the only game in the series to get a physical release in America, and it's also for sale on the PlayStation Store for the time being. Then came BadMan 3 Bigger and Badder, No Heroes Allowed, which makes things even more confusing because it drops the whole What Did I Do to Deserve This, My Lord naming convention. I don't know why. It's an exclusive title to the PlayStation Store in the West, and as a consequence is at risk of being lost to time forever. Then came BadMan 4, which is a free-to-play PlayStation Vita exclusive called No Heroes Allowed, no puzzles either, which never saw a physical release anywhere. Out of all the games in the series, it has the highest chance of being lost to time forever due to some DLC being associated with it to unlock the full game. So please download it before it's too late, as the game is hands down the best casual puzzler on the Vita. I'm just giving you a heads up. Then finally, in 2017, BadMan 5 came out, which was a fully fledged virtual reality experience known as No Heroes Allowed VR, which is exclusive to the PlayStation 4's VR. This time it did get a physical release internationally, and there does exist an Asia English version if you're the kind of person that likes to own your video games forever. Alright, I know that was a lot to take in, but I think it paints a better picture of why this series is so unheard of. The BadMan series stars the best character in Sony's roster, the Badman. Badman is a foul-mouthed, bloodthirsty demon lord that wants to bring forth the genocide of all heroes by overpopulating his subterranean lair with hundreds of monsters. And by American standards, the Badman could be seen as a progressive icon. Hashtag kill all heroes. Hashtag hero genocide. He mostly speaks in spastic outbursts with the occasional bit of strategy doled out to the player. I truly look forward to hearing what kind of crazy shit Badman's Badman's about to say next. In the Badman games, you play as the God of Destruction, as represented by this evil pickaxe here. You aid Badman in his conquest of the human world by building an underground dungeon in hopes of luring heroes down to their demise. The goal is simple. You build winding dungeons full of monsters to protect Badman from the heroes that want him dead. It's kind of the antithesis of most RPGs you've played, only it's not really an RPG. But at the same time it is. The game is more reminiscent of many real-time strategy titles that you may have played, wherein you have to cultivate an entire ecosystem to grow your military might to then slay your enemies. However, instead of clicking troops and assigning duties, they've boiled down the premise slightly here. You bust blocks to create an entire ecosystem of monsters. When you bust a mossy block, little slimes come out and spread their nutrients onto the surrounding blocks they touch. This enriches those blocks to create monsters of a different species. Different colors of blocks will determine what kind of species is gonna hatch out of them, and this is where the premise gets a little bit more complicated. It's an entire ecosystem, so there are some general rules in place. Certain monsters can only be bred with a lot of space. Some monsters do better in tighter corridors. Some monsters can only be summoned by carving out a single block, enriching it, and then breaking it to reveal a demonic seal, which will summon a bigger monster that increases the overall defense of the entire army. And finally, you have to keep in mind that in this ecosystem exists a food chain. Certain monsters depend on eating other types of monsters as a food source, or in some cases they may resort to cannibalism. Understanding this entire food chain and ecosystem will help you breed and mutate the ideal monster to take on the heroes. Yeah, I know, the game is a lot more complicated the deeper you dig beyond the surface, but thank Badman, they've included a very helpful and fun tutorial which will explain the game far better than I can. So the gameplay is broken up into two phases. The dungeon building phase, where you carve out some monsters to start breeding your army, and at the same time, dig out a layer to place Badman as far away from the entrance to the surface. Then comes the hero's attack phase, where the heroes invade the dungeon in search of the Badman to bring him to the surface to string him up for his evil deeds. You have a limited amount of time to build your dungeon in the beginning, so I would recommend carving out dead ends and winding pathways to confuse the heroes. This buys Badman more time to grow his colony. If a hero does manage to find Badman, they will kidnap him and begin their trek out of the dungeon, and this will be your last chance to kill them before they take him to the surface, which causes a game over. Much like the monsters, every hero has their own strengths and weaknesses, and it's quite helpful to understand these weaknesses so you can breed a specific type of monster and kind. The challenge comes from limiting your amount of dig power, so you have to carefully choose which blocks to bust. You can earn more dig power depending on how well you dispatch the heroes. The better you do, the more points you have in between rounds, which you can use to upgrade your monsters. The first three Badman games are nearly identical. Each subsequent entry does add one or two more mechanics, more maps, monsters, heroes, and spells to use. Honestly, that's not a bad thing when your game is already damn near perfect from the start. Badman 3, No Heroes Allowed, does introduce a water mechanic to the dungeons where you can bust a block to reveal a geyser, which will flood your dungeon. This creates an entirely new water ecosystem with a self-sustaining breed of water monsters. I just love flooding the corridors with water monsters and forcing the heroes through shit lane to get to the Badman. Enjoy the slog, fucko. This time around, some heroes may drop a dragon orb on the field, which if you collect enough of them, will unlock a new pickaxe with different powers. But they will not summon Shenlong. Trust me, I tried and I was disappointed. Badman 3 also introduced Badman's daughter, Badmela, who might be even more sinister than her old pops. I'm not quite sure who her mother is, but I imagine her birth involved Badman just shooting his nutrients on a block or something. The circle of life is a beautiful thing. Out of the original trilogy, No Heroes Allowed provides the most amount of content and was the last true BadMan game to use the original formula, before the series mutated into two very different spin-offs. The series jumped to the now sadly defunct PlayStation Vita in 2013 as a free-to-play touch-based block sliding puzzle game. Now don't let that description turn you off, because trust me on this one, you'd be missing out on one of the most addictive puzzle games on the Vita. I apologize in advance for the off-screen footage, but this is one of the few cases where it will not play on the PlayStation TV, as the game is entirely touchscreen dependent. Somehow, Acquire simplified the premise of the game even further by making 64 levels that take about a minute each to complete, as the game was designed with short bursts in mind. It's a free-to-play game, so there were some limitations put into place. For example, your dig power is tied to the amount of levels that you can play per day, and your dig power will recharge each new day that you check in. Which means, theoretically, you can beat the game without ever buying anything, given enough time, or you can go straight onto the PlayStation Store and buy an unlimited pickaxe, which essentially breaks off the free-to-play aspect entirely, making it a standalone game. The thesis here is pretty much the same: kill the heroes and protect Badman. However, instead of building dungeons, you break blocks and slide monsters into rows. 3 or more alike monsters in a row will populate a horde to attack the hero, as well as creating a block of a higher ranked monster. Heroes can attack you back by creating unbreakable blocks, which if they fill up the screen, it's game over. You can get rid of those blocks by either summoning a dragon or hatching a dragon egg. At the end of the level, there's a random chance to capture a hero, which Badman will then enslave in his lair. The captured heroes will mine endlessly for treasure and monster eggs. Treasure can be used to level up your monster horde. The monster mixing here is quite different, as some breeds require certain hero types in order to reach the next evolutionary level. There's a lot of collecting, mixing, and digging to satisfy older fans, and it's casual enough to attract newer ones. As it stands, it's the most accessible game in the series, given you have a Vita. If you own one, it's free to download, and this may be your very last chance to check it out for yourself before it's lost to time forever when Sony pulls it from the servers. So just when you think this series couldn't get buried any further into the realm of obscurity, Acquire developed the most recent and arguably the most bizarre entry into the series thus far: 2017's No Heroes Allowed VR. The mere existence of this game pushed me over the edge to purchase APS VR, and I finally have an excuse to talk about it, so here we are. No Heroes Allowed VR is a game of many firsts for the series. It takes the series both into VR 3D and above ground for a change. Badman and Badmela now have full voice acting, which concerned me slightly at first considering how bombastic the writing was in the original games, but the transition from silent to fully voiced was handled as best as it could have been.
Nice work, Goggles McGoggleface.
Goggleface, how dare you insult a god? I think they look very fetching. The way they, twinkle and, let's just start the next level, shall we?
You're still the god of destruction, but this time you've taken the form of a DualShock 4 controller. The world is now represented by a tabletop in Badman's castle. The goal is still to create an ecosystem of monsters to thwart those cocky heroes. But instead of busting blocks, you're dropping monsters next to these little fruit trees that provide them with nutrients to breed. You can use your DualShock 4 to vacuum up your troops to either place them on different spots on the field or you can shake the controller to breed super monsters. Once again, it's all a matter of balance and experimentation. Once you have a healthy army, you storm the nearby castle to murder every human in sight. When you beat a level, you earn points, and they can be taken to Badman's lair to be spent on upgrading the monsters of your choosing. This tabletop style of game fits well with the PlayStation VR and feels like a natural evolution for the series. There isn't a lot of movement to evoke any motion sickness. It's the kind of VR game I can recommend to just about everyone. It also provides a godly perspective for the player to truly look down on the world and appreciate the beauty of hero genocide like never before. Now, to wrap things up here, the BadMan series contains all the elements of a beautiful cult game. They have an original premise with a style of their own, lovable, well-written characters that stick with you long after you've stopped playing, and at the heart of it all, an abject failure of a marketing department that doesn't know how to boil down the genius of their product to the masses and ends up carving out a niche franchise that survives solely on word of mouth. So take the words from this mouth, the BadMan games are an endless source of entertainment and worthy of your time.